I caught my mother-in-law, Evelyn, slipping a few clear drops from a small bottle into my soda in her sunlit coastal kitchen in Santa Barbara. "A little refreshment for my favorite son-in-law," she said, smiling slightly too wide. I smiled back. I said thank you. And when she turned her back, I quietly swapped drinks with her husband, Vic Torthman, who never missed a chance to insult my writing career. 40 minutes later, Victor was doubled over, pale as a ghost, groaning from the bathroom. I just sat there, watching. My name is Lucas Rains. I'm 35, a fiction author from Seattle, and just returned from a book tour across Europe. What Evelyn tried to do that night didn't just shatter the evening. It changed everything I thought I knew about family. I was born in Detroit, but now living in Seattle, where I've built my career word by word, book by book. I've written everything from noir mysteries to historical epics. My readers are loyal, my publisher's happy, and it's never been enough for Evelyn or Victor Prescott. To them, success only counts if it's wrapped in a suit and comes with a corner office. Victor, a retired defense contractor, used to smirk across the dinner table and ask, "Still scribbling those fairy tales, Lucas?" More polished Evelyn would smile through tight lips and ask when I planned to transition into something respectable. I fell in love with their daughter, Alina, 8 years ago at a book launch in Manhattan. She was a sociology professor, sharp, compassionate, unshaken by my chaos. We fit, but from day one, her parents made it clear I wasn't the man they'd imagined. Every family brunch was a silent war dressed as civility. Evelyn would interrupt my stories to brag about Alina's ex, a corporate attorney with family money and Ivy League credentials. And Victor once handed me a pamphlet on alternative careers for creatives, as if I was a wandering teenager, not a grown man with a New York Times best-selling novel. Still, I smiled, nodded, and played nice until now. I met Alina during a torrential downpour in Manhattan 7 years ago, inside the lobby of a bookstore hosting my second novel's release. She was there for a panel on gender equity and stumbled into my reading by accident, soaking wet, glasses fogged, asking if she could sit for a moment. She stayed for the whole thing. We talked afterward 2 hours, then coffee, then dinner, and just like that it started. Alina was magnetic, a sociology professor with a razor-sharp mind, a fierce moral compass, and a laugh that could break tension like sunlight split storm clouds. She understood why I wrote and what I chased with every page, and I admired how she challenged the world around her. But the deeper we fell, the more resistance we felt. Evelyn and Victor didn't say it outright, but they dripped disapproval in every interaction. They called my work cute, praised my book covers without reading the contents, and introduced me at events not as their daughter's partner, but as a writer, like it was some phase I'd outgrow. The more successful I became, the more subtle their contempt grew. I brought signed copies of my books, tried to charm them, and even consulted a real estate agent when Victor mocked our one-bedroom apartment, but no gesture ever softened their view. Evelyn once joked at brunch that Alina's taste in men is like her taste in art, abstract and unpredictable. Victor just laughed. Every dinner, every holiday, and birthday gathering was the same cycle. Passive aggression polished with silverware, eye rolls disguised as polite laughter, and Alina squeezing my hand beneath the table in silent apology. I told myself I could take it, that love was worth the quiet humiliations. But that love was being tested in ways I hadn't seen coming, and soon, the cracks would grow too loud to ignore. 3 nights after I'd returned from my European tour, jet-lagged, weary, still running on espresso and airport pretzels, Alina insisted we attend her mother's birthday dinner. Just an hour, she promised. So, I ironed a shirt, slapped on a fake smile, and drove us through the tree-lined neighborhoods of Westlake, Los Angeles, where Evelyn and Victor's modern estate sat like a cold museum of curated perfection. Dinner began as usual, Victor bragging about his golf handicap, Evelyn critiquing Alina's hair with love, and me quietly counting the minutes. Then, as dessert approached, Evelyn disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 chilled glasses of her famous lavender spritz. She handed one to me directly. "A signature blend crafted just for you," she said, with sugar in her voice and steel in her eyes. But what caught my attention wasn't her words. It was the glass itself, different from the others. The ice looked cloudier. A faint swirl clung to the surface, almost invisible but not quite. My pulse quickened. Evelyn turned to grab something from the counter, and I made the switch, placing the altered drink in front of Victor, who barely looked up from his phone as he took a sip. I asked for water instead, saying the spritz was a bit too floral for my taste. 45 minutes later, Victor was drenched in sweat. gripping his stomach and stumbling down the hallway like a man hit by a ghost. The sound of him retching behind the bathroom door echoed through the marble halls like a warning shot. Evelyn turned pale. Our eyes met, and everything fell silent for a fraction of a second. In that silence, I knew with bone-deep certainty what she had done. And more terrifyingly, she knew that I knew. I didn't say a word. I picked at my cake while Alina rushed to her father's side. But inside me, something had shifted irrevocably. That night wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a declaration of war. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, no. This was colder than that. It was a calculation. Something inside me had snapped free and landed in a place beyond outrage. I wasn't going to confront Evelyn with anger. I was going to bury her with the truth. The next morning, while Alina was still asleep, I drove to Koreatown with the glass Evelyn had given me wrapped in a towel and zipped inside my laptop bag. I handed it to Dr. Min Park, a chemist I'd interviewed years ago for a novel on pharmaceutical conspiracies. "Personal or professional?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "Family," I said flatly. 3 days later, I had my answer. Benzodiazepines. Not enough to kill me, but enough to disorient, sedate, or make me miss my upcoming keynote at a UCLA writing symposium. My stomach turned. She hadn't just tried to make me sick. She'd aimed to unravel my career quietly, surgically. I didn't tell Alina. Not yet. I needed more than proof. I needed the whole story. So I started digging. First, public prescription records. Evelyn had overlapping scripts for Xanax from 3 doctors. Then whispers. A neighbor who mentioned Evelyn once fainted at a fundraiser after mixing pills and wine. A family friend hinted she'd accused a nanny of stealing earrings only to find them in her jewelry box. One thread pulled led to another, and suddenly, I was holding a pattern, not an anomaly. It wasn't just one night. It was a history of chaos wrapped in Chanel and served with politeness. I compiled every detail, every prescription, and every rumor into a file, and I waited. Because the next time I faced Evelyn, I wouldn't just have suspicion. I'd have evidence, intention, and leverage. She tried to treat me like a disposable character in her scripted life. But I was done playing along. This wasn't going to end with apologies or denials. It would end on my terms and with a truth she couldn't sweeten, spin, or silence. 2 weeks passed. I played the role of the dutiful husband smiling at brunches, declining the spritz, pretending the bathroom episode had never happened. But behind the mask, I was building a case. Every free hour, I became the version of myself I usually saved for writing thrillers, obsessively detailed, relentlessly curious. It started with Evelyn's prescriptions. I pulled every pharmacy database I could legally access through old contacts and quiet favors. She had not 1, not 2, but 3 active prescriptions for benzodiazepines, different doctors, different refill dates, all overlapping. Then came the testimonies. A former neighbor, whispering over the phone, confessed Evelyn had once accused her teen daughter of vandalizing their rose bushes only for a security cam to catch Evelyn doing it herself, drunk. Barefoot at 2 a.m. A country club acquaintance admitted that jewelry had gone missing during an event at the Prescott home, only to find later it shoved in the bottom of her handbag with no clue how it got there. It was a mosaic of whispers, rumors, and buried incidents that painted one thing clearly. Evelyn wasn't just difficult, she was dangerous. But then something changed everything. An unmarked padded envelope arrived in our mailbox. Inside, a USB drive and a single post-it note that read, "You should see this. No name. It's just smudged ink." My skin turned to ice when I plugged the drive into my laptop. There, captured in clean, silent surveillance footage from Evelyn and Victor's kitchen, was the truth, grainy, black and white, but undeniable. There she was, pouring liquid from a small bottle into my drink. There I was, walking in seconds later. And, later, at the table, Victor drank the glass she had prepared for me. But it didn't stop there. The following clip cut to the dining room after we'd left. Evelyn screamed at Victor for drinking the wrong glass, while he yelled back that this wasn't the first time she'd done something reckless. And in that moment, it hit me like a freight train. They'd done this before. This wasn't an isolated betrayal, it was a practiced pattern. I watched the videos 3 times. I memorized every frame. Then I called every contact who had once brushed up against the Prescott family, asking questions I hadn't dared ask. I spoke to Alina's college roommate, who told me about a man named Jordanthy boyfriend before me. He was a cardiac surgeon, she said, and he adored her, but Evelyn hated him. She said he wasn't Prescott material. Evelyn started planting doubt accusations of cheating, subtle hints that Jayden was lying, manipulating. Eventually, Alina broke it off. He tried to tell her the truth, but it was too late. I tracked Jayden down, now married, living in Austin. He was hesitant to talk until I told him everything. Then he sent me screenshots of texts Evelyn had sent him, anonymous, posing as a woman he was supposedly cheating with. The manipulation had been calculated, and it didn't stop with him. I contacted 2 more of Alina's former close friends, who had mysteriously drifted away over the years. Turns out, they hadn't drifted. Evelyn had pushed them out, one by one, whispering lies, sowing discord, until Alina felt isolated, and her parents became the only constant. This was psychological warfare, waged with smiles and teacups. What they did to me wasn't unicate, was a method. Vanessa, Alina's sister-in-law, confirmed it when she called one afternoon. They did the same to me, she said. They nearly broke my marriage with Owen. For 2 years, they tried to convince him I was manipulative, selfish, and unstable. It almost worked. I asked her why she was telling me now. Her voice cracked. Because I see what they're doing to you, and I can't watch them do it again. That night, I compiled everything: video files, screenshots, prescription logs, testimony. I burned it onto a master USB drive and backed it up twice. Then I sat at my desk in the dark, heart pounding, staring at the screen. I wasn't just up against 2 toxic in-laws. I was up against an entire architecture of control, a fortress they had built, brick by brick, out of gaslight and guilt, over decades. But I was done hiding in its shadows. It was time to set the stage. And this time, the lights would be on me. The invitation came as a text. Dinner on Sunday, just family. Evelyn wants to clear the air. I stared at it for a long minute, then typed back, "We'll be there." But I wasn't coming to eat. I was coming to expose. By then, I had assembled everything: footage, documents, testimonies, timestamps. The truth is curated like a court case. All I needed now was a room, a screen, and their denial. On Sunday evening, Alina and I arrived at the Prescott residence in Westlake, the sun melting behind the palms, painting the sky in honey and ash. Everything looked perfectly normal. Roast chicken, candles, cloth napkins folded like origami. But beneath the polish, the tension clung to every surface like humidity. Evelyn greeted us with that familiar, counterfeit warmth. Victor nodded, barely hiding his contempt. Owen, Alina's brother, stood awkwardly near the wine while Vanessa lingered behind him, tense and quiet. After dinner, I cleared my throat as coffee was poured and cake was served. "Before dessert," I said, standing slowly, "there's something I'd like to show everyone." Evelyn froze. Victor glanced up, annoyed. "Now?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "Now." I plugged the USB drive into the flat screen in the living room and hit play. Silence fell like a curtain. The first clip rolled. Evelyn in the kitchen, unscrewing a vial. Then me, walking in. Then the switch. Then Victor sipped. Then Evelyn later screamed at him for drinking the wrong glass. The footage ended, and no one moved. Alina looked as if her soul had been scooped out of her body. Vanessa stared at the floor. Owen blinked like he'd been punched without warning. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice trembling but sharp. "This is absurd. That footage is out of context. Edited." I turned to Victor. "You said it yourself. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. Those were your exact words." Victor stood slowly, setting his cup down. "You think this little theatrical stunt proves anything?" His voice had shifted, less smug, more calculated. "You've always been insecure, Lucas. You never fit into this family, and now you're lashing out." I didn't flinch. "You're right. I don't fit in with people who lie, gaslight, and manipulate their own daughter's life like it's a company merger. But I'm done playing polite." Evelyn's composure cracked. "Alina, sweetheart, you know how emotional he gets. He's always twisting things. Please don't fall for this." But Alina didn't speak. She just stared straight ahead, tears lining her lower lashes. Then, out of nowhere, Owen broke the silence. This isn't who they are," he mumbled. Vanessa turned to him, eyes burning. "Yes, it is, and you know it." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder: texts, voice memos, screenshots. "You want more proof? Here's what they did to me." Owen staggered back as the floor had vanished under him. I stepped forward, voice steady. "I'm not asking you to hate them. I'm asking you to see them." The air was heavy, thick with betrayal, and for the first time since I'd entered that house, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. Evelyn tried one last maneuver, after the living room imploded in silence and truth. She stood tall, spine straight as a blade, and delivered her defense with brittle grace. "Everything I've ever done," she said, trembling beneath its poise, "was to protect my daughter. I didn't blink." "You mean, control her?" Her eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, I reached into my bag and handed Victor a slim black envelope-thick paper, sealed with wax. He opened it cautiously, fingers twitching. Inside, a printed transcript of Evelyn's prescriptions, screenshots of anonymous texts she had sent Alina's ex-boyfriend Jordan, and surveillance footage stills labeled with timestamps. "You said I married your daughter for convenience?" I told him. "But I've spent every day of our marriage protecting her from the two of you." Victor's face paled, the blood draining like water from a broken pipe. He didn't speak. But I wasn't finished. "This isn't new behavior. You did this to Jordan. You did it to Vanessa. You pushed away every person Alina had ever trusted until only your influence remained. Well, I'm not leaving, and I'm not afraid of you." Victor stepped forward, low and deliberate. "You want to fight?" he said, almost whispering. "We've dealt with men like you before. Soft, creative, disposable. Ask Alina about Theo. He was the one before Jordan. She doesn't remember him because we erased him." The air cracked. Alina looked at her father, horror crawling up her face like frostbite. "What are you talking about?" she asked, voice breaking. He hesitated, then smiled not warmly, but cruelly. "You were 20. He was older. A photographer too. It got serious. Too fast. Evelyn said he wasn't right, so we ended it." Quietly. Alina staggered back as if struck, and I stepped between them, my hand clenched at my side. "That's the legacy you've built," I said, rewriting her life like you're the authors. "But this story's changed." The room fell still again, but it wasn't silence anymore. It was surrender. Handshaking, Vanessa pulled Owen aside and whispered, "They almost destroyed us too." And for the first time, Owen didn't resist. He nodded. Evelyn stood frozen, staring at the screen and displaying a paused frame of her face in mid-scream. Then, I shut the television off with a flick of my remote. "Here's how this ends," I said calmly. "You stop interfering, you stop planting seeds of doubt, and you stay away from our marriage unless you're invited in. No more manipulation, no more surveillance. If you don't, this," I gestured to the evidence, "goes public. Not because I want revenge, because I won't let you do this to her again." Victor opened his mouth, but I stopped him. "You've underestimated me since day one. Because I'm not like you. I don't measure power in bank accounts or square footage. I measure it in truth, and tonight, truth won." Evelyn broke then. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing not out of regret but out of defeat. Victor sat beside her, too stunned to react. Alina finally stepped forward. "I love you both," she said quietly, "but I won't let you control me anymore." Her voice didn't shake. It rang clear. "This ends now." We left without another word, with no hugs, no goodbyes, just the sound of our heels on the marble floor and the weight of finality pressing against our backs. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp. Alina gripped my hand like she never had before, and in that moment, I knew the war was over. Not because they gave in, but because we stopped giving them power. 6 weeks passed without a single call from Evelyn or Victor. No texts, no follow-ups, no carefully coded guilt trips are hidden behind holiday invitations. Just silence, and it was glorious. Alina and I weren't bracing ourselves for subtle attacks or emotional landmines for the first time in years. Our apartment felt lighter, meals were quieter, yes, but peaceful. The kind of peace you don't realize you've been living without until it settles over you like a warm quilt. We started doing small things that had once felt impossible. Sleeping in on Sundays without family brunch obligations, and cooking without judgmental eyes hovering over the stove. I wrote again not out of duty, but joy. And Alina? She started sketching. Something she hadn't done since grad school. Her lines were soft but firm, her colors bold. I hadn't seen that part of her in years. And I realized that what we had just survived wasn't just emotional. It had been spiritual suffocation. Then came the letter. Thick, embossed, formal. A certified envelope from a Los Angeles law firm. I opened it cautiously, expecting a cease and desist or some attempt at reputation damage control. But inside was something else entirely. A deed. The apartment we had been renting was paid off and transferred to our names. Along with it, documents for a trust fund were set up in Alina's name. and a second was in the name of an unborn descendant. At the bottom is Victor Prescott's signature. There was no letter. No apology, no explanation, just paperwork and a legally binding signature. I showed it to Alina, and she stared at it like it was some ancient text she didn't know how to interpret. "What does this mean?" she asked. I paused. "It means they know they lost, and this is their version of penance." Alina didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She folded the documents, placed them in our safe, and said, "They don't get to buy peace, but I'll take the distance." And we did. Quietly. No celebration, no victory lap. Just forward. A few months later, Alina sat me down at our tiny kitchen table, her face flushed and her hands shaking slightly. "I'm pregnant," she said, voice trembling but sure. I blinked. For a moment, everything in the room blurred. Then the air came rushing back into my lungs and I reached for her. "We're having a baby?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. She nodded, laughing through her tears. And in that moment, all the fire, all the hurt, all the noise faded. There was only us. And something new. Something untouched. We didn't tell Evelyn and Victor right away. We waited until the second trimester, until the first ultrasound, until the heartbeat was more than a flicker on a screen. When we finally told them by text, not phone, Evelyn's response came within minutes. "We're thrilled. Please let us know how we can help." We ignored it, not out of cruelty, but out of preservation. We'd learned the difference between civility and closeness. By the time our daughter, Isla, was born, the new terms of our relationship with Evelyn and Victor were well established. They were allowed to visit, but only with advance notice, supervised, and without unsolicited advice. And they followed those rules. To the letter. No snide comments. No gifts laced with guilt. They smiled for photos, held Isla gently, and left when asked. It wasn't reconciliation. It was respect born from consequence. And that, in itself, was a kind of victory. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to unfold. My literary agent reached out about an anthology, project first-person narratives about family dynamics and generational healing. I hesitated. The story felt too raw, too recent. But Alina read my first draft and said, "This might help someone else escape what I didn't even know I was trapped in." So I submitted it. Not long after, I was contacted by a journalist from The Atlantic. She'd read the piece. I wanted to talk not about revenge but resilience. The article went viral. My inbox flooded. Dozen shundred soft messages from strangers. Some survivors. Some are still stuck. One woman wrote, "I didn't realize my in-laws were breaking me until I read your story." Another said, "Your wife's silence used to be my silence. Now I'm speaking up." And just like that, our pain became something else. A map, a warning, a lifeline. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Santa Monica Mountains and Isla slept quietly in the nursery, Alina and I sat on the balcony, her head on my shoulder, our hands entwined. "Do you think they've changed?" she asked softly. I thought for a long time before answering. "No," I said finally, "but they've adapted, because now they know we're no longer scared of losing them." She didn't respond. She just nodded. And for the first time, in a long time, we didn't need words. We had survived. Not by burning bridges, but by building walls they couldn't scale. We didn't win because we destroyed them. We won because we reclaimed ourselves, piece by piece, boundary by boundary. And in a world where control is often passed down like inheritance, the simple act of choosing your peace, that's the loudest revolution of all. Spring arrived quietly in Los Angeles, the kind that doesn't shout but gently unfolds brighter mornings, jasmine-scented breezes, and Isla's first genuine giggles echoing through our home like music. Life no longer felt like a minefield. It felt like soil messy, yes, but fertile. I just finished hanging the last photograph in my new studio space, a sun-drenched corner in Silver Lake, where my writing desk sat across from framed prints of faces and places I'd captured over a decade of storytelling. The gallery's soft opening was set for Friday. Nothing flashy, just people who mattered. Friends, clients, readers. With Isla on her hip, Alina walked in wearing a green linen dress, and that calm smile she wore more often now. "They confirmed," she said. "My parents are coming." I didn't answer right away. I adjusted a frame by the door, then finally said, "Okay," because that was all there was left to say. Victor and Evelyn arrived late, dressed well, rehearsed, and visibly aware of their place in the room. They brought a silver rattle for Isla, and a copy of the Atlantic article, laminated and bound in leather. "We thought you might want it for the archive," Victor said. I nodded, polite, unreadable. Evelyn looked around at the photographs, eyes lingering on one of Alina holding Isla in the kitchen, sunlight pouring through the window. "You've built something beautiful," she said. I watched her for a beat. "Yes," I said, "we have." They didn't stay long. A few compliments, a few photos, a few strained attempts at warmth that didn't quite land, but also didn't cross any lines. When they left, Alina exhaled. "That was surreal," she whispered. "Not perfect, but peaceful." And it was. Because peace, we'd learned, doesn't always come as an apology. Sometimes it comes in the absence of warfare. A week later, a package arrived in brown craft paper with no return address. Inside was a first edition copy of my debut novelty, one Evelyn once called Whimsical Nonsense, with a sticky note inside the front cover. It read, "Hired the best photographer I know. I thought you'd want a copy, V." I placed the book on a shelf beside the others. I didn't call to thank him. He didn't expect it. We understood what it was. Not forgiveness, not affection, but acknowledgement. That summer, our days were full and imperfect in the best way. Diaper changes, early morning feedings, coffee spilled on manuscripts, and Alina's sketchbooks piling up on the dining table. There was no dramatic closure. There is no cinematic fade to black. It's just real life finally lived on our terms. One evening, as we sat on the porch, Isla was asleep upstairs. Alina turned to me and said, "Do you think they'll ever fully change?" I thought for a while, then shook my head. "Number. But they've realized they can't change us. And sometimes that's enough." She smiled, rested her head on my shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you for not letting them rewrite me." I looked at the fading sky and realized something I hadn't put into words before. I didn't win by outmaneuvering them. I won by refusing to play their game. I had protected what mattered, not with revenge, but with resolve, not with rage, but with boundaries. And in a world where silence is often demanded in exchange for survival, living honestly on your terms isn't just peace, it's power. Quiet, unshakable, mine. I used to believe love alone was enough. Things would work out if you held on tightly, smiled through the tension, stayed polite, and kept peace at the cost of your comfort. But I've learned something much more complex and far more freeing. Boundaries are love too. Protecting your peace, partner, and truth is not selfish. It's survival. It's strength. What Evelyn and Victor tried to do wasn't just about me. It was a generational script control dressed as a concern, manipulation masked as tradition. And for years, we played our roles in their drama, believing harmony meant silence. But the truth is that silence enables harm, and love without voice isn't love at all, it's captivity. So here's what I want you to remember. You are allowed to question the people who claim to love you. You are allowed to rewrite the story others wrote for you. And you are allowed to walk away from a table where respect is no longer being served even if that table looks like family. In the end, peace didn't come from revenge. It came from reclaiming our voice, our space, our future. And maybe that's the real legacy we'll pass on to our daughter. Not just survival, but self-respect.